Today we're going to take a deep dive into sanders, taking a look at 3 different styles, how they work, the advantages and disadvantages of each style, and which one might be best for you. Now there's a lot of different types of sanders out there, and many of them have a lot of different features that we need to be aware of, and they can range in price from anywhere from $30 all the way up to over $1,000. And I just bought 2 new styles of sanders that I've been intrigued by, so I thought it might benefit all of us to take a look at these 2 new styles. Hold on there, cuz I'm not sure we should be doing this sanders video. You got a frog in your pocket? Why do you say that? Of course I do, you know that, and last I heard, the old Colonel Sanders is still pretty pissed. Why is that? He didn't get that promotion he was shooting for. They went ahead and gave it to Mr. So. I get it, General So's. Is that what you're doing? KFC jokes, Colonel Sanders jokes? I'll get you through this video. You always do, so let's go over some of my current sanders before we dig into some of these new sanders. So my 2 primary sanders that I use on a regular basis are my RO150 and my ETS125. And I'll be honest, I got suckered into these 2 sanders from YouTube envy by watching channels like Whiskey Butterfly. But these are sanders that are just not necessary and frankly out of budget of most everyday woodworkers. But they are nice, and if you do have the funds, I would recommend both sanders. And the Festool ETS125, which is a 5-inch orbital sander, is probably one of the cheapest Festool items you can buy. But that's only Festool cheap, as this sander still comes in at just under $300. And I'd be lying to you if I told you it was 6 times better than my original DeWalt sander. But that wasn't the first Festool sander that I got, as I purchased the RO150 first. And there's 2 primary differences between this sander and the ETS125. First and foremost is the size, as this is a 6-inch sander versus the ETS, which comes in at 5 inches. But more importantly, this larger sander is a Rotex, which basically means with just a flip of the switch on the top, it can go from a random orbit sander to a rotating sander. And when it's in that rotational setting, it's great for rough sanding and removing a lot of material. But I don't even want to begin to talk about the price of this sander. But the good news is, to do woodworking, you really don't need sanders like this. In fact, I would argue you really shouldn't be spending over a Benjamin on any orbital sander. Now, I already mentioned price, but there's also a few other things that I think you should consider before purchasing a sander. The first thing to consider is size. Now, your 2 most common sizes are going to be your 5-inch orbital sander as well as your 6-inch. And I'd go with 5-inch all day long. Now, if you're like me, you may think that the 6-inch is going to get the job done faster, but its size is actually going to cause more problems than it's worth. Not only does its larger diameter make it difficult to get into tight spots, but its heavier weight can cause wrist strain. Speaking of wrist strain, how comfortable is the grip in your hand? As there's numerous types of handles and grips, and you're going to want one that's going to be comfortable for those long sanding sessions. What about the shape? Well, 99% of the orbital sanders out there are going to be round, but there's also rectangular ones as well as triangular ones. And I'm here to tell you, stick with round, as not only is the sandpaper more readily available, but there's only one sander I have that never leaves its home. And that is my triangular Delta sander. And although this sander is great for getting into tight spots, I simply tend to use a hand sander or chalk up the attachment in my multi-tool. It's also a great idea to have speed adjustment on your sander. Depending on what type of work you're doing, you may need to speed up or slow down your sander. Another thing to consider is what type of sandpaper does it use, and is it readily available? Because if you look at my Festool sanders, you can see that this sandpaper isn't the same kind that you buy at the big box store. And there's nothing worse than being in the middle of a project and having to wait a couple of days to get your sandpaper in the mail. And probably one of the most important things to consider is the dust collection, if there is any, as this will not only protect your lungs, but it will also greatly increase the quality of your sanding. And there's really 2 things to consider with dust collection. Does it have a dust collection bag, and can it be easily attached to your dust collection system? And although in the shop you're primarily going to be using your dust collector, you still want to have a bag, as there's going to be some times when you need to collect that sawdust to patch up some of your mistakes. And the last thing to consider, which gets us into our video today, is the source of power generation. And there really are 3 main sources of power, all of which we're going to take a look at today. Whether it's corded, battery operated, or pneumatic, each one of these has its advantages and disadvantages. So today, let's get into 3 unique sanders, all of which you may have a use for in your shop. And for comparison purposes, all 3 sanders today are going to be made by DeWalt, and I purchased all of these sanders with my own money. So let's get into my first sander, and one that I've got Whoa. Hold on there, pretty boy. Let's give them what they want. This video is about as boring as watching a nun win a chess tournament. You just making up phrases, or is that a thing? Of course, don't you have ESP Nun? Anyway, I'm pretty pissed at my ex. She switched out all the toilet paper with sandpaper. Ever since then, all my projects look like shit. Let's check out our first sander. So this old beauty's got some miles on her. In fact, she's the second sander I ever owned. And she's nothing special. This is probably the cheapest DeWalt random orbit sander you can buy. Now at today's price, this thing is coming in at right about 75 bucks. But keep your eye out as this thing goes on sale all the time. And in fact, if you keep your eye out over at the Poe, you'll often find this for about 50 bucks. So what do you get for that price? Well, you obviously get the sander as well as a dust bag. And lastly, you get a kit bag. Which, as we all know, my cousin loves to collect these sacks to put his balls in. What? They make great ball sacks, and you were just gonna throw it away. And this little guy's pretty powerful for its size, with its 3 amp corded brushless motor. Now, one disadvantage of this sander is it doesn't have a speed adjustment, but it does rotate at 12,000 orbits per minute, and each orbit is 3/32 of an inch. This sander also has an extremely low 5-inch profile, which can help with fatigue and give you better control. And the grip is made of a durable, comfortable rubber that really feels nice on the hand. And another feature of this sander which helps with fatigue is it's got a counterweight system to help balance and save your wrists. And at a weight of 2 pounds 11 ounces, you can really sand for hours with this thing. Lastly, let's take a look at its physical construction to take a look at its remaining features. First and foremost, it uses a hook and loop system and can accept almost any sandpaper you can get at the big box stores. Around that sanding pad, you'll notice a small sheath, and this helps with dust collection containing all that sawdust. If we look at the front of the sander, you'll see the on and off switch is conveniently located for your index finger. And the switch has got a rubber coating on the top of it to prevent sawdust from getting into that switch and prolonging its life. And that about covers the entire sander, and as you can see, it's a pretty simple little tool. And I've had this sander for almost 10 years now, and I've never had an issue with it, but there is one thing that may cause some people some problems. And that is the cord. However, for me, it's never been an issue, as I typically don't take this sander out of the shop, and frankly, I'm always using dust collection. And because of this, since I have that hose attached, it really doesn't make a difference to me if there's a cord. And let's face it, with a corded version, you're never going to run out of power, but for some of you who are on the go, this may be a problem. And that's exactly why we need to take a look at our next orbital sander. And if you haven't guessed already, our next sander is cordless. Hey, don't you forget about me, I got a good one. I'm sure you do. I bet you can't guess who I voted for president this year. Was Colonel Sanders running? Anyway, I came up with it when I was finishing up a project. I was sanding my butt off, so much so that my sandpaper caught on fire. And then I thought of, why not Bernie Sanders? Oh boy. Let's get into our next sander, which I'm super excited to check out. This is the DeWalt XR cordless sander. Let's open up this box and check it out. So this is a sander that I've been bulking on for a long time now, and that's simply because I didn't see the need to go cordless. And that all gets back to me always having my sander connected to a dust collection hose. But sometimes we're not able to use dust collection, or our hose just won't reach, and other times we need to get into tight spots. And I've also heard from a lot of you in the comments that you've had success with these, so I thought I'd give this a shot. So let's get it out of the box and see what it comes with. Since I already have a DeWalt battery, I bought the tool only, and inside the box you're only going to find 2 items. The 20-volt sander itself, along with a dust bag. Now before we talk about anything with this sander, we need to talk about the runtime. Now I don't have any fancy DeWalt battery, just a simple 2 amp hour battery. Now they claim depending on your battery size that this sander can last anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. But I'm going to put those claims to the test. I'm going to load this battery into the sander and do some light sanding to see how long it lasts. And if we look at the clock, it's 10:42 a.m. So let's do some sanding and see how long this thing lasts. Now, as I'm sanding here, I did want to point out a couple of things. I did notice that the power was slowly decreasing over the life of the battery. Now, it was still enough power to get the job done. However, you can hear an audible slowing down of the motor. I'm also noting that dust collection is pretty good. It's not perfect, but very comparable to other sanders. And lastly, I do think the grip is very comfortable and limits the fatigue. And just like that, she's completely dead. Let's go check out the clock. And if we look at the clock, you can see it says 11:04, but it took me a couple of minutes to move the camera around and the lighting, so let's subtract out a couple of minutes and go with 20 minutes. Now that's not as great as I was expecting, however, I did notice one thing. I got tired before the sander quit. You think that surprises anyone, Cupcake? Probably not. Now that I've gotten a little bit of a feel for the sander, let's talk about some of its features. Now this sander's got a very similar low profile to the sander that we just took a look at. And in fact, the handle is even a little bit more closer to your work surface, coming in at about 4.5 inches. And as I showed earlier, it runs on a standard 20-volt DeWalt battery and has a brushless motor. And I suspect that this bad boy will run a lot longer than the 20 minutes I experienced if you upgrade to a higher amp hour battery. Since we just finished sanding, let's take a look at the dust collection and the dust collection bag. The first thing that I want to do is to take this bag off and see what kind of sawdust we got from that 2x4. And as you can see, we got a nice little mound here from that 20-minute sanding session. With that dust bag off, we can take a look at the port to attach a dust collection hose. This port accepts vacuum hoses of 1¼ inch diameter. Unfortunately, however, it won't attach to my Festool hose without an adapter. And just like our previous sander, this sander's got an orbital rotation of 3/32 of an inch. Now this sander claims that it's very well balanced with or without the battery. However, in doing just a few tests, you can see that it's much more lopsided when it has that battery installed, which can absolutely affect your fatigue while doing your sanding, and maybe that's why I was so tired. Now one thing that this sander's got going for it, which our previous one didn't, is it's got a variable speed adjustment. And this is easily adjustable with your index finger going from 1 all the way up to 7, or 8,000 to 12,000 orbits per minute. And right next to that variable speed adjustment, you'll once again find a sealed on and off switch right at your fingertips. If we look at the sanding pad, you'll once again notice we're dealing with a hook and loop system, and it accepts any sandpaper that you can get at a big box store. And once again, you'll find that nice sheath on the bottom to corral all your sawdust into the bag. Lastly, let's weigh this tool with a 2 amp hour battery attached. And as you can see, it comes in at about 2 pounds 14 ounces. Now if you use a larger battery, this weight's going to go up. So what's the price of this sander? Well, if I look on Amazon today, it's a little bit over $100, but if you keep your eye out at the big box stores, you'll often find this on sale. And in fact, I bought mine at Home Depot on a Black Friday deal, and it came in at under $60, which I think is an excellent deal for this portable and tossable tool. Well, that takes us through our first 2 sanders of the day. Before we move on to our final sander, I ask you to do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, and share this video. Also, if you're interested in some fun woodworking merchandise like all the t-shirts that I wear in my videos, check out FlynnDoggWoodwork.com. Lastly, if any of these sanders interest you, I'll leave links in the description below, as well as YouTube links so that you can go check them out for yourself. Now let's get back to the sanders. So our next sander is a sander that I've never tried, and I first noticed one while watching an Amish YouTube channel. There's no time for sin and vibes, living in an Amish paradise. Really? Hey, you started it! I got another one for you! Go ahead, shoot. I used to get bullied in high school all the time. They'd take my head and rub it up against sandpaper. It used to get really heated, but fortunately, I was no match for them. So our next sander is a pneumatic one, and I'm guessing most of you don't have one, so I thought it might be interesting to take a look at one. Just out of curiosity, leave a comment below if you know why Amish could use a pneumatic sander and not an electric one. So this is the DeWalt dual action pneumatic sander. Let's get it out of the box and check it out. So the first thing that I notice about this box is it's got a little bit of heft to it. This thing's kind of heavy. And obviously the majority of that weight is in the sander itself. Let's take a look at the 4 items that come included in this box. Inside the box, you're going to find the sander itself along with a sanding pad. You'll also find some lubrication oil as well as a hose connector. To attach the sanding pad to the sander, you simply screw it into the base of the sander. To attach your sander to your air compressor, you can either use the included accessory or your own valve. And once you screw in your valve and attach your hose, you're just about ready to go. And this accepts any 1/4 inch valve. Then you can flip your compressor on and let that pressure build. Now that I've allowed that pressure to build, let's take a closer look at the sander. First off, let's take a look at the pad, as this is a little bit larger, coming in at 6 inches wide. Now if you have a good eye, you may have noticed this is not a hook and loop pad. It's actually a regular pad that's made out of a material that resembles pleather. And it's this type of pad that's meant to be used with adhesive back sandpaper, which you can find at any big box store. Simply take the sandpaper, peel the back off, and adhere it to your sanding pad. Now you may have noticed this sandpaper doesn't have any holes in it. And that's because with this sander, you're not going to find any dust collection. And that's because this sander is probably going to be one of your more aggressive sanders, similar to a Rotex, which means there's going to be a lot of material removed and you're going to want to mask up. Let's take a look at the handle and see what's going on with it. There's essentially two grips with this sander, a sort of pistol grip that runs off the side as well as a top-mounted grip that gives you control. Right above that pistol grip, you'll find the trigger switch. By depressing this switch, it allows the air to flow through the sander and rotate the pad. And at full speed, this sander rotates at 11,000 rotations per minute and has an orbit diameter of 3/16, which is twice as big as the diameter of the other two sanders we've looked at. And believe it or not, this sander has an air regulator on the handle to allow you to adjust the speed of the rotation. And lastly, there's two different types of orbits you can have with this sander. By pushing the lock to one side, you can get a straight circular rotation, and by pushing it to the other side, you can get an orbital rotation. Since I mentioned this thing's a little bit hefty, let's put it on the scale and see how much it weighs. And as you can see, this thing is almost twice as heavy at over 4 pounds. And that just about covers all the functionality of this pneumatic sander. The only thing left to do is to mask up and give it a try. Now surprisingly, while doing a little bit of work on this cookie, I was impressed by how much control you actually have. The sander wasn't as overpowering as I was expecting, and it was much more easier to control than my Rotex. Well, a pretty cool little sander, especially for the price, as I only paid $69 for this tool. And I think this is going to be a great addition to my shop along with my other two DeWalt sanders. Well, I hope I made this sanding video about as fun as it can be. If you like videos like this, check out the links at the very end of this video to see more tool reviews. Well, once again, I really appreciate you joining me today. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, and share this video, as it really helps out this small woodworking channel. Also, if you like fun woodworking accessories, check out my website, flynndogwoodwork.com. Until next time, take care as always. You know, my old man was addicted to sandpaper. He denied it and said he didn't have a problem. He said it only took the edge off. You know, I was pretty mean in high school. We had a blind kid in our class, and we used to always take his text and replace it with sandpaper. He was always confused. All right, I know what you want. How about this one? What do you call a piece of sandpaper in Egypt? A map! All right, last chance. You know, I was accused of assaulting a man with sandpaper. Wasn't true, though. I just roughed him up a bit. You guys are tough.